Recording.
Yep.
Yeah, it says it's recording. Howdy, readers. I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and this is my friend Lukas, whose channel is A Cruel Reader's Thesis. And today, it's very early in the morning, just so you know, it's 7 a.m. my time. I've been up for 45 minutes. I'm still drinking my coffee. But today, Lukas and I are going to be talking about two things that are connected. We're going to be talking about Ingmar Bergman's novel, The Best Intentions, which is a novel that he wrote about his parents. And then also the film adaptation of The Best Intentions, for which Bergman wrote the screenplay and Bille August directed. This is the 3-hour theatrical release of the film. There's a 5 or 6 hour miniseries version of the film, which aired on PBS as part of Masterpiece Theater in the early 90s. That's never been released on DVD or Blu-ray in America, much to my chagrin. I've been trying to get the Criterion Collection to release it for a long time now, but they don't listen to me. So we are going to talk about these two works of art and how they are in conversation with each other. And yeah, and also I suppose in conversation with mine and Lukas's own love of Bergman's I guess au revoir. I've never been quite sure how to pronounce that word, but
body of work.
Anyway, what's that? Yeah,
body of work.
His catalog. So we'll just jump right in. So neither of us had ever read the novel before. I had seen the film many times, probably not many times, but this is probably my 5th time. And but Lukas, this was your first time watching the film and reading the book, correct?
Yep.
Okay, and you just watched the movie yesterday.
Yep.
All right, so I guess so before we talk about the film, let's talk about our impressions of the book, since we both came to this for the first time. What were your kind of initial thoughts, I suppose, while you were reading the novel?
So, yeah, it was hard for me to read the book as just a book, because I, for one thing, knew that it was made into a movie, and because it was written by Ingmar Bergman, and also because the book, for those who aren't familiar with the book, is written sort of like a screenplay. It's like I don't know how much of this is gonna come out, but like, there's the person's name in bold and then dialogue, and then you have interludes that are in prose, kind of like that. And those are sometimes, like, I've never read a screenplay before. I'm guessing you have, but this is sort of how I imagine a screenplay being written, with the dialogue and then like prose places that are like, oh yeah, then he got up and walked over the door and and he looked off pensively or whatever. So the fact that it was written like a screenplay, the fact that it was by Ingmar Bergman, and knowing that it was made into a film where Ingmar Bergman wrote the screenplay, made it difficult for me to read the book as like just a book. But I tried to think, like, what would I think of this book if I knew nothing about Ingmar Bergman, knew nothing about the movie or anything else. And I think it would be a really solid book. If I wasn't aware of Bergman's history, I would probably wonder why it was written like a screenplay, like why it needed to be written that way. And I still wonder sort of why this book was even like billed as a novel, because it really does read to me in many ways like a screenplay that just has a couple of little sprinklings of a novel in it. But I thought it would be a really solid read if I were just reading the book as a book. Yeah, I mean, I think it is a really, both the book and the film are a really just interesting portrait of this relationship between these two people and their parents' relationship to them, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. So it is similar to a screenplay. So in screenwriting, they're screenplays, and then there are what are called shooting scripts. And I've always been really partial to, when I've written screenplays in the past and when I taught screenwriting, so a shooting script is essentially a screenplay that has been prepared for filming. And they're usually, I don't know how often the screenplays that are written by a third-party screenwriter are then prepared into kind of shooting script form by the director. I think it might be something, where it's usually done by the person who's written and directed the film. But a shooting script has a lot of like camera directions, instructions on what kinds of edits to make, et cetera, et cetera. And I've always really preferred reading shooting scripts because it helps you to see the film in your mind better. And so as a result, this didn't resemble a shooting script in any way. And so for me, it actually felt less, I think, like a screenplay, just because I'm used to shooting scripts, than it did like a play. There were no kind of instructions for camera work or anything like this, but there were instructions for the actors, almost in a sense of kind of, moving to stage left or stage right, et cetera, et cetera. The actor should do this now. Whereas you don't really see that at all in a shooting script. But yeah, I thought the novel was really fascinating. I was not, just flipping through it, when you just pick it off the shelf for the first time, it's easy to see that it has some resemblance to a screenplay or to a play. But what I wasn't expecting when I read this book, and I thought was really just refreshing and interesting, was how Bergman himself would interject often, right? There was this kind of, and that's actually, it was another thing about it that made me feel like it would lend itself to being done for the stage, because I could see a scene kind of developing on the stage and the actors doing their thing. And then I would imagine the stage lights going down on the actors and then a light coming on Bergman standing just off stage, talking to the audience, and essentially the way that he does on the page, which I think would be really cool. And I haven't looked to see if there's been a stage adaptation of The Best Intentions, but it wouldn't surprise me, especially given that, as we both know, Bergman was as well respected and as well known as a stage director as he was as a filmmaker. But yeah, so I thought the novel was a really cool, curious hybrid of, kind of fiction and play and drama, screenwriting, and also kind of memoir, I suppose, on some level as well. And so I was not expecting that. And I was really impressed by it. It felt very playful at times to me, especially given how serious the subject matter is.
Yeah, I felt like those parts where Bergman kind of interjects himself into it, and he says, "Oh yeah, well, I changed this detail about my parents," or something. He would say things like this, sort of like about, like talk about his own process of writing or whatever, or things he changed. Whenever those happened, I always thought that I feel like that would be interesting to someone who knows Ingmar Bergman and is interested in him, but maybe if you were a reader who knew nothing about him, you would find that really weird and maybe
it could be
off-putting. But those passages are always really short anyway, so I don't know if they're really, I'm not saying they're a huge flaw in the book, but it does seem, I don't know, a certain reader might find that self-indulgent, maybe. I don't know. But
it could be that I found it interesting when you said that you tried kind of looking at it as somebody who didn't know anything about Bergman. And it never even occurred to me to do that. I think just because I've seen so many of his films and I've read one of his autobiographies. It's called The Magic Lantern. And so I know just quite a lot about his life. And so it never even occurred to me to do that. So as a result, I think I was just super fascinated by those interjections, by that kind of authorial intrusion. But yeah, it makes complete sense what you're saying, that somebody who doesn't know who he is, might be wondering, like, who the hell is this guy, and why do I care what he thinks? Like, why can't the author just stay off the page? I don't know. That's interesting. If I ever go back and reread this, which I may, because I really enjoyed it, maybe I'll try to do that. Try to imagine myself coming to it as somebody who knows really nothing at all about the author.
Yeah, it was one of the blurbs on the back of mine, I think, says something the closest thing imaginable to a Bergman film without pictures or sound. While you were talking about how it seemed like part play, part novel, part this, part that, I was like, yeah, it basically feels like reading a Bergman film, like
Yeah, well, and one of his really straightforward, I mean, there's apart from the kind of authorial intrusions and stuff, there's really nothing experimental about this. I mean, it's much more like, say, like Fanny and Alexander or something like this, right? Like it's a big family epic. Whereas, I mean, if you can imagine Persona, can you imagine Persona as a novel? What that would look like on the page? Yeah, I could tell you stories about when I showed Persona to Kelly and Dan from Film Club and Lynn, his wife, our pastor. They did not respond to it in the way that I hoped. We'll just say that. Yeah, there were a number of things that I wanted to talk about with the book. I suppose the thing that I found most striking about the novel, which I talked to you about a little bit on Voxer while we were reading it. Well, you had finished it. I read it after you. Was I just think the character of Bergman's mother, who's named Anna in the book, but whose name was not Anna in real life, which is a whole different thing that I want to talk to you about. But I thought she just leapt off the page. She's such a strong woman. There's that scene where her and her brother Ernst and Henrik, who's Bergman's father, for those of you who don't know, they go on this kind of little mini holiday together at this, family has this second house or whatever. And then when they're done with that, when they get back, Anna's mother hears from, I think, their aunt. Their aunt was, in the next apartment over or whatever. It was kind of eavesdropping, and had said, "Oh, there were sounds of your daughter speaking to a man in the guest room." And so Anna's mother confronts her with this, and just the way she stands up to her mom in that scene, I thought was so wonderful. Like, she seemed so fully alive to me. There was that part where her mother said something like, "Oh, you probably slept with him or something." She says, "No, but if he had asked me to, I would have." And I just thought it was wonderful, especially for, if we're thinking about the fact that this is, so we can think of Bergman as an artist, as a filmmaker, as a stage director, as a novelist, but to think of Ingmar Bergman as a son, reflecting on his parents, reading through their letters, looking through photographs of them from before he was born, and trying to imagine his way into their lives, and try to imagine the kind of woman that his mother might have been based on what he knew about her, I thought was really, really interesting. It was so cool for me to look at Bergman in a new way, to look at him as the child of parents, rather than as, like the greatest filmmaker, in my opinion, the greatest filmmaker of all time. And when I think about my own parents, and like how do we assess our parents, right? Their personalities, their histories, their lives. How much do I know about my own parents' histories, right? Their childhoods, their parents, their grandparents, et cetera, et cetera. And the truth is, I don't know tons about it. Like, I don't know very much about it at all. And so if I were tasked with doing something similar, looking through my own family's photos, remembering my own childhood, and trying to imagine myself into the circumstances and the personalities of my parents before they had me, it would be difficult. It would be really, really difficult to do. And it would be an interesting kind of therapy, I think, as well.
It would probably be really bizarre.
Yeah.
To do that, just because it would be weird it must have been weird for Bergman to do it, because he's looking back on these people who brought him into the world, but before he was in the world,
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's like I remember once when I was watching like old home videos of that my parents took, and there were a couple of videos of my brother from before I was, so my brother's 4 years older than me, and there were a couple of videos of him before I was born, so he was like 3 or something, and it was so weird. It's always weird watching videos of my brother when he's really young, because he acts like such a child, and I'm used to him being the older one,
Yeah.
And so that's always a weird experience. So I imagine it must be something a little bit like that, like this weird, just seeing people before you were even existed to know them. Yeah.
Yeah, something that you're entirely familiar with, right? From your whole life. There's never been a day when you didn't know your parents or your brother. And to see them, working their own way in a video through an existence that doesn't feature you at all because you literally don't exist yet would be strange. Yeah, that would be really, really strange. I have a younger brother, and so it would be impossible for me. Well, I'm also older than you. When I was a little boy, there weren't video cameras. But I remember when we got our first camcorder, and I think I must have been, 12 years old or something like that, and it was a big deal, and clunky little like mini VHS tapes they would go inside it and stuff, but yeah, it would be bizarre, I think. So the thing that I touched on that I wanted to ask you about in particular, because you're a psychologist, right? You're in a PhD program for, I think it's social psychology. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so we learn early on in the introduction to the book, to the novel, and I confirmed this online, that Bergman in the novel gives his mother the name of her mother, and he gives his grandmother the name of his mother, right? So his mother in real life was Karin or Karin, and his grandmother was Anna, and he swaps the names. And I'm wondering why he would do that. I mean, do you have any? I mean, he reflects on it, and he says, "Well, I can't really tell you why I do it. I just did it." And but I'm wondering what, I don't know, like part of me as I was reading the novel, because the grandmother, right, Anna's mom, dislikes Henrik so much, and passes this kind of severe judgment on him. And so by giving his grandmother the name of his mother, I found myself wondering if he was, I guess, trying to have his cake and eat it too on some level. Like if he was trying to give his mother her passion for her husband, but also to somehow give her, by giving her her mother's name, to give her that, or to assign to her that judgment of the man that she was passionate for, to sort of have her embody both of those things. But I thought I'd ask you, because it seems kind of not like a Freudian thing necessarily for Bergman to have done, but it's a strange thing for him to have done, especially because he doesn't do that with Henrik.
Although he does change Henrik. His father's real name was Eric, right? I think. So he did change.
I don't know if it was.
Yeah, I no. I mean, I looked it up. His real father's name was Eric, and
Okay.
which I thought was interesting because it made me think of Henrik Ibsen, and I have no idea if it has to do with Henrik Ibsen, but anyway. But I don't really have an insight as someone who studies psychology, but it was interesting. What I thought of while you were talking about it was that Bergman's relationship with his father was pretty kind of troubled, as I understand it, and maybe because the mother of his grandmother, maybe because she was in real life so judgmental of his father, he wanted to think of his mother also judging his father in that way, because he wanted that sort of catharsis of being like, see, Dad, you are a horrible person. Well, I mean, maybe he didn't think that was a horrible person, but so maybe it was a weird like wish fulfillment thing, which I think you were basically saying with the cap your cake and eat it too. But yeah, that was the only thing I could think of. But I don't think I have any insights as a student of psychology, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But,
well, it makes sense. It makes sense, if that's behind why he made that decision. Especially because, I mean, why else write this story about your parents unless you're looking for some kind of catharsis or some kind of resolution maybe with them? I think because his father was so severe to him, I think another one of the things that's lovely about this book is that it was a chance for Bergman to maybe think of his father in a softer light, maybe than he had ever been given by his childhood a reason to. Because Henrik has moments where where he lashes out and he's violent and he, comes across as kind of despicable. But he also seems to really genuinely love Anna. He seems to really, really love her. And and I imagine, if Bergman was in fact, as he was, raised by a father who was a kind of stern taskmaster, his father was a Lutheran minister. What are you doing?
Just ignore me.
All right, Kelly's. I'm not sure what Kelly's doing. It would make sense, I suppose, for Bergman to want to kind of, I don't know, I suppose, set his father on the scales, right? And present his father in a way, even to himself, that was maybe more fair than he had kind of grown up with. This image of his father as a kind of harsh taskmaster. But yeah, I don't know. But I think that's probably the thing I like best about this story, was how the portraits of his parents are really clearly drawn, and they're really warm, and they're really loving and affectionate. I feel like, but they're also really honest. We see Henrik hit Anna, and who knows if he really did. But I mean, reading about him, one gets the sense that he wouldn't have, been beyond that. So it would be a difficult juggling act, I think, to write a novel about your parents in which you were profoundly honest about who they were in your own experience with them, but also I don't know. I suppose giving them a kind of a greater richness and a greater warmth than maybe you remembered in them at all. Like, how would you do that?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not the best. I guess this isn't the first time Bergman wrote something that was inspired by his father, at least, and his mother, perhaps. I don't know, but I know that, like Through a Glass Darkly, his the first or second film in his trilogy, like
love that movie.
Yeah, the father in that one is, I think, based pretty closely on Bergman's own father. And from what I've heard, Bergman actually showed the screenplay for that movie to his father.
Interesting.
But by the time he wrote this, his father was dead, I think, or I'm guessing he was. I mean, Bergman himself was already old, so I'm guessing his father was dead. So I don't know. Maybe it was after the death of his father that he started to go through that more complicated idea of what his father was. Not that the father who's portrayed in Through Glass Darkly is not an interesting, complex character, just he's a very different character from Henrik.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, this idea that that one can't be fully free to explore the character of one's parents until their parents are gone. I actually read something about that recently. Who was it? It was So this is interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I read. I don't think it was in an interview. It might have been in an interview. Anyway, Ian McEwan, the novelist Ian McEwan, was talking about how when his career was just starting, Philip Roth, who was like a titan of American letters already by that point, Philip Roth kind of reached out to him, and they sort of struck up a friendship. And Philip Roth was looking at the manuscript prior to publication of Ian McEwan's novel. I think it was The Cement Garden. And Roth told Ian McEwan, you need to write about your parents as though they're dead. Like, you need to write about your sense of family as though your parents are not around to read it and judge it and pass, kind of some kind of criticism on it. And so I think that sort of feeds a little bit into what you're saying here, right? That Bergman felt maybe a greater freedom in writing about his father after his father's death, right? Because his father's not around to say, well, I don't really appreciate this.
Mm-hmm.
This portrait. I don't really want you telling the world about how I hit your mother and this, that, and the other thing.
And I definitely see in Henry, I mean, obviously, as something else that I've heard a little bit about Eric Bergman, Bergman's real father, was that, one of the like real pieces of beef that Ingmar Bergman had with his father was, his father was a pastor, obviously, and would go and give these beautiful sermons about compassion and whatever, love and so on and so forth, and then would go home and lock Ingmar in a closet for a whole day for disobeying him once, you know? It was like this weird spectrum between this kind, well, you know, this pastor with a lot of human insight and this really harsh, I'm not thinking of the correct word, but harsh, stern father, whatever. And I see that in Henrik very well, I think. I can see how he would end up like that. Because he does
Yeah.
seem to care about people. You know, he wants to be in this this parish, this sort of country parish, and because he thinks he's going to help people, and he wants to help the workers in their strike, and he wants to help them organize, and so on and so forth. He cares about people, but then we, like you said, we see him have these outbursts where he just sort of loses it for a minute, and so he is a person who's mostly like probably mostly nice and calm, but has this boiling undercurrent of rage that only boils over every now and then. And yeah, anyway, so I find Henrik to be a very interesting character.
But the most interesting character for you was Petrus.
Yeah.
So here's what I wanted to ask you about Petrus. So at the very end of Best Intentions, Bergman gives us this epilogue, and he tells us again in one of those moments where he's addressing the audience, the readership in particular, and he tells us that that the epilogue, what happens in the epilogue, is completely his own invention. Right. You know, and it leads one to then think everything else in the book must be not completely his own invention. Like he must be working as closely as he can from letters and what have you. You know, but the epilogue of the novel, he says, is completely his own invention. And I want to talk more about the epilogue when we get to the film. But it makes me wonder how much truth there is to what happens with Petrus, right? He never talks about Petrus, you know, photographs of Petrus among his family's things or anything like that. You know, and that scene where Petrus runs off with Bergman's older brother, who's just a little, like a toddler at this time, and is going to drown him in the river. It's really, I mean, in the novel, it's powerful. In the film, it's incredibly powerful. But how much, I don't know, like, did you get the sense reading it that Petrus was largely an invention of Bergman's, or did you get the feeling that that he was probably a real character who his parents took in? And especially, I mean, how did you feel about that scene where Petrus tried to kill Bergman's older brother?
I guess I wasn't thinking about it that much as I read the book. I guess I took for granted that it probably some semblance of that happened, but so I'm not sure. I feel like I would need to reread the book and keep a more close eye on that, thinking about that. But I don't know. I don't think that there's really enough in the book to say whether it was true or not, because again, he doesn't offer any commentary. But as you were talking, I was like, maybe Petrus is like a shade of the Bergman to come. He's Ingmar come before his time. But anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, if that were the case, then it would be Ingmar making a kind of attempt at supplanting his brother, right? Making him the eldest son, which is very interesting as well. I hadn't thought about that. That's cool.
That would be interesting, because I know I don't know a super lot about Bergman's life, but I know that I have learned. I think I was listening to an interview with Bergman at one point where he talked, or maybe it was an interview with like Liv Ullmann. But anyway, somewhere I learned that Bergman also did have a kind of an ambivalent relationship with his mother that was different from his relationship with his father. But he loved his mother, but also sort of had trouble with her. And I think I can see how that would end up. If Anna is anything like his actual mother, I can see how that would happen. And so the fact that he had that ambivalence of loving her, but sort of, I don't quite know what was the other side. Why? I think it might have just been that she didn't always treat him as well as he might have liked, and so that was the ambivalence. But anyway, it would make sense to me if Petrus was in a way for Bergman himself to enter the story, because Petrus, too, maybe similarly to Bergman, isn't loved by his mother as much as, or his mother, I mean, Anna, who's not
Yeah.
really his mother, but, isn't loved by her as much as maybe he wants to, but he loves being there. And so it actually would make sense to me if Petrus was a way for Bergman to sort of enter the story.
Yeah, that's cool. That hadn't occurred to me at all. And I really like that interpretation. And I think it makes sense. It makes sense in a lot of ways, right? Yeah, I mean, if Bergman felt at times, if he felt unloved by his mother, I mean, we learn that she not only doesn't love Petrus, but she doesn't even like him, you know. And and she's kind to him in a kind of begrudging way, or kind of a dutiful way, or whatever. Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I wonder if there's, 'cause I don't remember anything in the Magic Lantern about this. But I wonder if there's any way to find out if Petrus was real, or if he's entirely an invention of Bergman's. Because if he wasn't real, I would say then, I mean, that reading has to be completely accurate, right? That's Bergman's way of putting himself in the story, putting himself like kind of between his parents, trying to steal his mother's love from his brother, all manner of different things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a biography written of Bergman at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really looked, because I think he's written I think he wrote two autobiographies, and so I've just always kind of looked to them. But yeah, I haven't looked for some reason.
Well, it might. I mean, if there's a biography of him, it might be in Swedish, which might not be helpful. But
Yeah.
that thought occurred to me only just right now. The reason that Petrus originally interested me actually was because I felt like when I read the book, and maybe this was me reading something into him that wasn't there, but I think it might be supported by the movie, is that I thought that he might be someone. I thought that he might have autism. Because of him teaching himself multiplication by himself, teaching himself to read, and not getting along with other kids, not having friends. In the movie, I felt like he maybe talked a little bit monotone, but I don't know whether it's sometimes hard for me to like gauge tone of voice when people are speaking in foreign languages, because I'm so wrapped up in how alien the language sounds. But
Yeah.
but I wondered whether maybe he had autism. And again, I don't know whether that's me reading into it, because the reason that I originally went into psychology actually was because I wanted to work with children with autism, and so I learned a lot about autism. So it's a subject of interest. So it might be me reading it into him, because I find the idea of an autistic child being featured in this book, in this movie, interesting. But I did wonder about that, and I wonder about like his background, because I mean, his parents couldn't take care of him. I don't think they say his parents are dead, but they just can't take care of him.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think he goes with his aunt and uncle, right? And he doesn't like being with them either. Yeah, I mean, he's very much, to use the language of Peter Carey and Oscar the Cinda, he says a square peg in a world of round holes. Like, he just doesn't fit anywhere.
Yeah, and so I was just very interested in what his deal was. I don't mean to sound insensitive when I say that, but just I was interested in his background and his mind, and yeah, and I'm like, there's not going to be a sequel made, obviously, but I'd be curious to hear what happened to him. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a part in let me see where it's at. Just I probably didn't mark it. No, I had to have marked it, actually. Yeah, so since we're talking about Petrus, there's something I found really, really, really interesting. There was a difference between the novel and the film. And when I watched the film again this time, I hadn't quite finished the novel yet. I had like 30, 34 pages to go, something like that. And so I had just read. So I watched the film, and then when I was reading that night, I was reading the stuff that was happened literally in the film that I just watched. And I think that's the only reason I noticed it. But in the novel, when the women in the sewing circle at the Bergman's house kind of confront them at the end, and they're having this conversation about, you know, why there's so few of them anymore and why people are staying away now. The character of Magna says the Reverend Granziu told his housekeeper, Mrs. Sell, that Henrik and Anna went to see Queen Victoria at the palace in June, I think it was. Mrs. Sell passed that on to some members of the women's corps. I suppose they were all singing Henrik's praises, and then she probably said that we won't be keeping him for long because he's been offered the court chaplaincy. But so in the novel, she attributes the rumor to the Reverend, okay? Henrik's his boss, essentially. But in the film, in that scene, she does not attribute the rumor to the Reverend. She just says there are rumors that you guys went to Stockholm, and she says there are rumors. And it's that night when, after they've all left, and Anna goes up and she takes her son out of Petrus's bed and puts him in his own bed, and she's looking at Petrus, and then she goes and she talks to Henrik and she says, we have to send him back. And it made me wonder, in the film anyway, if Anna was suspicious that Petrus was the one who had started the rumors, that Petrus was the one who had let that out somehow, that he had told some child or something like this, maybe as a way to kind of be cruel. Because remember, he overheard the whole conversation when they were offered that position in Stockholm, and he was like, are you leaving? You're leaving. And they said, no, like, you misunderstood, et cetera, et cetera. And he was very kind of panicked about it. And so I thought it was a really interesting decision for the filmmaker, Bille August, to take. And again, right, I mean, was it in the screenplay that Bergman wrote? Or was it a change that Bille August made from the screenplay to I guess, plant the suggestion in Anna's mind that Petrus had been responsible, directly or indirectly, maliciously or not, for the rumors that kind of created this dissension and all these people kind of being suspicious of the Bergmans. But I thought that was super, super interesting, a really interesting change from the book, which is definite, right? The Reverend is the one who started this rumor, and in the film, where you're never quite sure who started the rumor, and then after that very night is when Anna becomes just deeply suspicious of Petrus, and the next day is when he tries to kill Bergman's older brother.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I like that idea, although I'm not sure how a little boy like him would have like gone out and went out around to his husband like, hey, you know. Yeah.
Well, I was wondering about that too, but it seems to me that they have, you know, I mean, there are scenes in the film anyway. There are scenes where you know, there are people from the village kind of there, and they're moving things, and, you know, people like bringing milk over or whatever, and you know, maybe they would have their kids with them and something like this, and you know, yeah, and I mean, Petrus isn't terribly social, which makes me think that if he were to do something like that, that it would be malicious. It would be a way of kind of getting back at them, because he felt betrayed by them, or he felt like he was going to be cut away from them somehow. But yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting. And the next time I watch the film, I'm gonna pay closer attention to that and see if the film is suggesting that in some way.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the benefits of having seen the film before reading the book. Because I was curious to see what you would see that I didn't, just because you've seen the movie before reading the book. Because, yeah, that's interesting. Well, I certainly didn't notice that because I didn't see the movie, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but so as far as the film goes, right? You watched it yesterday. We didn't box about it last night, so I have no idea. So it's one of my favorite films of all time. And I've been really, really curious to hear your take on it. It won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. It also won Best Actress at the Cannes Film Festival for Pernilla August. And yeah, I've been really anxious all night to hear what you thought of the film, what your impressions were.
Well, so my first weird thought when I looked at Pernilla August was like, that looks like Shmi Skywalker. And then I looked it up. I'm like, oh my god, she was in the Phantom Menace. God. Ugh. God, I
That's
cannot
funny.
believe the cast that they got for the Phantom Menace. Like one of the worst movies with one of the best casts ever. Anyway,
Yeah.
uh, but uh, no, I really liked it. I noticed a lot of the omissions. So they leave out a lot of the details of Henrik's schooling. And I didn't know that there was a 5-hour miniseries. So I wonder if that is included. And I was even paging through the novel this morning and just noticing little exchanges and conversations that were in there that were definitely not in the movie. And so that was sort of the first surface level thing I noticed. And I can kind of see why you would leave all the schooling stuff out of it. Some of the things they talk about are interesting. I mean, I'm guessing in the miniseries they do include that, and it is interesting. But I can see why in a feature film they would see that as probably expendable. But no, I really liked it. I really liked Pernilla August and whoever plays Karin, her mother. I really liked her. I really like Max von Sydow, even though he's a tiny role in this. Whoever plays Henrik, I mean, I thought he had a really good face because he had like
he looks like Bergman's dad. Like he looks exactly like him.
And he has like a gentle face, but also like it's sort of angular in a way. And I feel like that sort of perfectly encapsulates his character too, where it's like very soft, but also there's an angularity to it. Like I don't know, I just noticed like his chin that was like this very distinct. Anyway, weird thing to talk about, but I just felt like physically he seemed very, very good for the part. So I liked him. I loved the soundtrack, very sort of minimal soundtrack.
Yeah.
I don't know who composed it, but I really loved the soundtrack. Very kind of gentle and very like it wasn't a very extensive soundtrack. It felt like the same track was used several times. But it was
there's the main piano theme, which is literally just a handful of notes, but it's so exquisite, it's so beautiful. And actually, even though I'd seen the film numerous times in the past, I've always remembered that piano theme being the only music in the film, but it wasn't. When Anna goes to, was it Italy or Switzerland to recover from tuberculosis, it's in that scene that we get different orchestral music for the first time. And so I noticed that. And then, of course, at the very, very end, I mean, after the characters have spoken their final lines, there's different music there as well. But that main piano theme is one of the most beautiful movie themes I have ever heard. My friend Ben described it once as like the composer figured out how to make melancholy into a sound. And that's what that piano theme is.
It's really weird. There's actually on the Wikipedia page, there's no composer attributed for the soundtrack. That's very bizarre.
That is strange, yeah.
But yeah, no, I really like the soundtrack. It was funny. The beginning of that theme sounds very similar to the beginning of Mozart's the Adagio movement from Mozart's 23rd Piano Concerto, which I don't know how many people who were watching will be familiar with that, but if you heard it, you'd probably recognize.
Well, how many people are watching are familiar with The Best Intentions, though, too? Yeah. This might end up being a video that has like 5 views.
But this is a piece of music where it's one of those pieces of music where you might not know it by name, but if you heard it, you would probably recognize it because it's. I mean, anyway, but it's a piece of music that Terrence Malick makes great use of in The New World many times in The New World. And it sounded very similar to the beginning of that piano concerto. So whenever I would hear the beginning of that theme, I'd be like, it's Mozart. Oh no, it's not Mozart. But anyway, so I loved that soundtrack, and I feel like the change in the soundtrack. I didn't notice the change in the soundtrack for Switzerland, but that kind of makes sense because she was sort of. Because they were also like on a holiday in a way. When she recovered, they were like going through Italy and so on. So it makes sense that there would be more maybe light orchestral music for that part. But I love the cinematography too. Just some individual shots that were just beautiful. I'm actually going to be rewatching the movie probably Tuesday with my mom because I had to watch it without her. So I'm looking forward to experiencing that again. But
my favorite shot, I mean, since we're talking about cinematography, my single favorite shot in the film is, and there's no dialogue or anything like that. It's just a moment in the movie. You can look for it when you rewatch it, but it's a shot of I can't remember if it's Anna and Henrik doing it. It might just be Anna, but I think they're both there. But I think they're it's this really wide shot of the river, and they're kind of, you know, in the right of the frame, and they're down at the edge of the river, kind of just washing clothes or preparing clothes for washing. And the river's just fucking roiling, man. Like, it's just intense. And I just love that shot because of the majesty of the whole thing. And also because it reminds you of how small they are in the face of just how severe the landscape is where they are, and the climate is where they are. I thought it was just a beautiful way of reminding you that how tiny they are in the face of forces that they can't really control. You know, in the novel, we're told numerous times that it's 30 below zero, and you're just like, man, like, why would anybody live there on purpose?
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that shot in the film, and then also the final shot in the film of Henrik and Anna sitting on the two benches next to each other but apart. I think that's just a beautiful, beautiful shot.
Yeah. I really liked a lot of the shots inside of the Åkerblom house. Because I don't know, it's just I was really interested in their house. I don't know, because in so many scenes when you see that house, the furniture is covered in white sheets, which I usually assume people do that to sort of keep dust from collecting when they're gone. And so it was this very sort of I don't want to say, it's not quite ghostly, but it's almost like empty in a way, full of luxury, but maybe not full of human warmth, given the way Corinne behaves, maybe. Although Corinne clearly does love her daughter and so on, and you know, Max von Sydow's character is definitely affectionate. But I was just interested in the shots of their house, and I know that there was a particular shot with a train that I really liked, but there are a few different shots with the train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So the cinematography was lovely. Yeah, I thought that I don't know the name of the actor who plays Henrik, but he and Pernilla August had really good, chemistry. I really liked actually the actress who plays Henrik's mother, Alma. I really liked her. I thought that.
Yeah, I don't know who that is. I'm not sure what her name is.
She was really, I don't know. I kind of felt for her, even though she literally had one scene in the movie. But I just felt for her because it seemed like she was sick. The scene where she's praying to God about, like, you know, why can't I love this woman that my son loves? And it was also interesting to compare her with Karin, who basically they're in the same position where they really dislike the person that their child has picked as a spouse, but they behave very differently about it. You know, Karin is here actively trying to sabotage the whole thing, and then Alma is sort of like, okay, I'll give you my husband's necklace, you know. And I can just see that she's like forcing herself into that whole scene, and I'm just like, oh god, that is like sad and beautiful. I don't know. It's like, yeah, I really liked her a lot too. And I thought it was unfortunate that they left out, because I think in the novel there's a scene where at the end, near the end, where she dies, where spoiler alert, where she dies.
Yeah.
And they left that out, and I felt a little bit bad that they did. If ever that miniseries is released, I'll try to watch it, and hopefully that scene is in there. But I would think that, given that actress's clear abilities, at least in my opinion, that would be a very moving scene as well. Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, my hunch would be that the miniseries probably includes just about everything in the book. So yeah, I would be curious to see that scene as well. You know, I go back to what you were talking about initially about them leaving in the theatrical release of the film, them leaving all the stuff about Henrik's schooling out. And I suspect all of that's probably in the miniseries. But what's interesting about the theatrical cut and about them leaving all of that out is that, so in the novel, we see that Henrik's schooling isn't really going as well as he would like, right? He fails that one exam. He has to stay in the program for longer. And then when he goes and he meets Anna's family and people are asking him how his schooling is going, this, that, and the other thing, he presents a version of himself and how his education is going that is more favorable, that is more accomplished than what's actually happening in his life. And so we see him, what's the word? Dissemble, is that the word, right? That he's dissembling a little bit with her family and with other people that he meets to kind of make himself seem more appealing or more, what's the word? I guess just more accomplished than he is. Whereas in the film, because they do leave all that out, we take what he says about his education and how his schooling is going, we take it at face value because we have no reason to do otherwise. And so in the film, Henrik does seem more accomplished, whereas in the novel, we know what's actually going on with his education and that he's failing exams and he's not doing terribly well. And so it changes, it fundamentally changes how we actually see the character of Bergman's father by leaving this detail out.
I know, and there's a really interesting scene in one of the, or really interesting thing that someone says in one of those scenes involving his education, and I think it might be that very first scene where he fails the history exam, the church history exam. I think it might be the professor who tested him, and the professor says, in order to be a good pastor, you must have very extensive knowledge of church history, something like that. Like he says, you can't be a good pastor without this. And then he adds at the end, but I think you might be one of the exceptions, Henrik. And then gives him his grade, and that's all. And I thought that was such a weird thing to say, because it's like, okay, well, you just failed him, but told him that he'll probably make a good pastor, even though he didn't do well in your subject or something. But I just thought that was an interesting point. I didn't quite know what that teacher meant. I guess that teacher was probably a bit of a hard ass, but but I was just intrigued by that I guess this teacher must have thought that Henrik had a intuitive skill at preaching that other students don't, which means that other students need this church history to make up for these other sort of more I don't know if intuitive is really the right word, but innate. They don't quite have the innate skill that he has at preaching. And I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I didn't quite know what to make of it, but I felt like there was something there that I don't know.
Well, I felt like it was a way of, for me, what that did was, it communicated that the instructor was aware of this, and that Bergman, in writing the character of the instructor saying this, was aware of this, that that ministers all have very different gifts, right? And this is something I've had a lot of preachers. I've had a lot of preachers in my adult life, and some of them are really, really good at writing sermons. Some of them are really good at delivering sermons, right? They understand their voice as a tool, as an instrument. And some of them aren't good at all at writing or delivering sermons, but they're really, really good at taking care of their parish, going and visiting the people who are sick, et cetera, et cetera. So pastors all, I think it's easy to kind of assume that pastors all have, all right, so these are the gifts that pastors have, and they all have them in roughly the same. But it's not the case at all. Yeah, I mean, there are pastors who are brilliant at this and terrible at this. They have to be reasonably capable at all of these things, but they all have their own kind of special talents or their own special gifts. And I mean, we had a priest in an Episcopal priest in Missoula when we lived up there, and he was just, God, I loved his sermons. I loved them. And but he was not very nice. He was not a very nice man. And and I just remember having a couple of conversations with him. Once at maybe a Christmas party or something like this, and he just seemed really I don't know, like he just did not want to be talking to me. Like he was not interested in in his Kelly's back for some reason. God knows why. But he didn't seem terribly interested in that part of his job as a minister, right? Communicating with or socializing with, or even just like a one-on-one kind of connection with his congregants. His gift was in writing great sermons and delivering them beautifully. And so I feel like that was a little bit kind of where that was going. Acknowledging that Henrik maybe doesn't need to have this because his other gifts are stronger than maybe the people who did pass that church history exam.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Something else that I leapt out at me more when I watched the movie than when I read the book was the role that class plays in the movie. Because clearly Henrik comes from a bit of a lower class background, whereas the Åkerbloms seem maybe not quite aristocrats, but definitely like pretty well off.
Yeah, they're definitely affluent. Yeah.
Yeah, and he even calls Anna a snob when he tells her that his then fiance is a waitress. And you have the strikes that Henrik wants to help sort of organize, or at least he wants to allow them to use the chapel to use them to talk things over. And you have there's the whole issue of should he take the position as the chaplain in the hospital. And it seems like part of what's motivating Anna is that she's used to a certain standard of living given her upbringing, whereas Henrik is not. So Henrik is maybe more accepts more that they will just need to stick it out in this remote place. There was anyway, that leapt out at me more in the movie for some reason than it did in the book.
It seems very much that Anna wants to go to Stockholm less because of the position itself for her husband than because she'll be in Stockholm and there are theaters and there's music and as it is, she's out there in the world where it's 30 degrees below zero and you have to ski to the next house and whatnot. And she seems to really, she loves her husband, but she seems to resent the world that he's kind of thrust her into.
Yeah. And I mean, you can make the argument that, or I think you can make the argument that her desire to go to Stockholm and his desire to stay are maybe more two sides of the same coin than they are like opposites. Because I mean, she wants to go to, like you said, she wants to go to Stockholm just because it's Stockholm and because they'll have a good money and so on. But it seems like the reason he wants to stay in this country, Buddha, whatever it's called, is just this sort of fetishization of self-sacrifice in a way.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think when you look at that from a certain perspective, that's really two sides of the same coin. I think this fetishization of self-sacrifice and this just superficial desire to just be in an easy place and live an easy life. And so I thought that was interesting because there are a lot of instances in the story where someone wants help, wants compassion, and they sort of see the motives of the other person that's helping them, and it troubles them or angers them. So like the very first scene is Henrik sort of throwing off an opportunity for him to make his and his mother's life easier, right? The estranged grandfather offers money that would make their lives easier. And in the book, I think there's an added weight to that scene because Alma dies near the end. And I get the sense that if Henrik had accepted the offer from his grandfather, maybe he would have had the money to pay for better treatment, perhaps. And so there's a bit more weight. But anyway, but he rejects it just because he knows what his grandfather and grandmother are and that they made their lives difficult, and so he just wants nothing to do with them. And then Petrus too. Petrus at first benefits from the help of Anna and Henrik, but then sees at one point what Anna really thinks of him, and suddenly that changes his perspective. And same thing with the people in Buddha. They are happy to have. I'm sure it seems like they're happy to have the pastor and his wife. But when they hear about him going to Stockholm, they think, oh, he's just staying here because he thinks he needs to help us poor unfortunate people out here, and that clearly makes a lot of people angry. And so there's a lot of instances where the person who's receiving compassion sees the motives of the other person giving compassion, and that makes them resentful in a way. And I thought that that was a really interesting sort of dynamic to explore.
Yeah.
And I feel like I started talking about all this because of something you said, and I completely forgot what it was.
I think you're right. I think there's a lot of pride in the film, and I think the film's really good at exploring the ways in which pride, I think, can corrupt people and can injure people. It's a really complicated story. I would so love to see the long version of this someday. If you go on IMDb, the theatrical version and the miniseries are listed as two distinct projects. So I've added the long version to my watch list so that whenever it appears on any platform apart from Netflix, because for some reason Netflix, but it would never be on Netflix, I'll find out about it, right? Because IMDb will let me know that that's how I found out about Eureka, right? Like I clicked on it and it's like, oh my God, it's on Mubi right now. Okay, I have to get Mubi for 7 days, So, and if you actually look at Mubi, if you look at the best intentions on Mubi, it also lists in its catalog. So I don't know if Mubi has ever shown the 5-hour version, but it lists it as something in its catalog. So who knows if they'll ever introduce that. But anyway, yeah. Well, before we wrap this up, and this is great. This is a great way to wake up actually on a Sunday morning, right? Like, I was so worried about. I was like, oh my God, it's still dark out, and I'm gonna have to go downstairs and talk about Swedish art. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do this. It's a great way to wake up. One of my favorite things, and it's in the novel, but I think it's much more because we can see it in the film. It's much more kind of striking and moving. One of my favorite things about this is that at the very end, right, that epilogue that Bergman has invented, when Henrik approaches Anna in the park and she doesn't see him, she's on a bench and she's got her head turned, and he goes and sits on the next bench, and then she senses him and turns and looks, and they have that conversation, that brief conversation, and he lets her know he's accepted the position in Stockholm. But I love the fact that Anna is heavily pregnant with Ingmar in that scene. I love the fact that Bergman himself, for the first time in the story, is actually present in the scene itself. The man who, or the little baby who would grow up to become the man who would write the story that we're seeing filmed in front of us, right, is there's something very meta about it in a way, right? That the author of the story we're watching is within the story, is in the woman's womb, and is about ready to come out. And I just think it's very cool. It's a very cool way of the author kind of signing the work, right, of putting his stamp on it. For the very first time in the story, at the very end of the story, we see Bergman in the shape of his mother's pregnant belly, which I just think is just really, really beautiful for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I liked that too. And even if you didn't know anything about Bergman, I think it would still work, because you can look at it as a sort of meta thing, but if you forget all about Bergman and just look at that scene, it's still, pregnancy is a very common metaphor for, a new beginning for obvious reasons. And that's happening.
Well, it's just, it's a beautiful visual way of orienting the characters in relation to their future rather than the past that is so kind of haunting them and troubling them in that moment.
Yeah.
Well, this was fun, my friend. Thanks for reading this with me and watching the film, and we're gonna do, just so you all know, Lukas and I are gonna do another kind of Bergman centric buddy read in 2021 this year, and then a novel written by, I think her name is Lynn Ullman, Liv Ullmann's daughter, right? So the daughter of Ingmar Bergman and Liv Ullmann. And I think it's a novel about her childhood. So it's going to be kind of another thing like The Best Intentions, where we have a child writing a novel about her own parents and her own upbringing. But in this case, it's actually going to be one of the parents is going to be the man who wrote this novel about his parents, which is kind of cool. Yeah. So who knows when that'll happen this year, but yeah, we've got that in the cards.
We're also doing a Tarkovsky one, or at least I'm guessing we're going to do a Zoom discussion too. But
yeah, so we'll do something similar to what we've done here with the book and the film. We're going to read Zona by Jeff Dyer, which is about Tarkovsky's film Stalker, and then we'll rewatch Stalker, and then talk about there it is, and then talk about Zona and Stalker in another video that may only get 5 views or 6 views.
If we really wanted to go to town, we could also read Roadside Picnic by what is it, the Strugatsky brothers?
Yeah, we could because that's the source novel for Stalker.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
I think we both own that novel too, don't we? Didn't you buy it?
I don't own it. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't own it. But I've long wanted to read it. That's something to think about. Yeah, I could look to see if our library has it. I don't know that they do, but yeah, that'll be something we can mull that over. Especially because Zona, I don't know if you've looked in my copy anyway. Yeah, it's got like really big margins, and the type is rather large and kind of far apart. It doesn't look like it's going to take long at all to read. Now, granted, the subject matter is intense, and so maybe that'll kind of make up for it. But yeah, that'll be fun too. Yeah, I don't think. I'm trying to think if I've done this on my channel before, where I read a novel and watched the film and talked about them kind of in relation to each other. But I don't think I have. I think it's the first time, and it was cool to do with you. So
we did it with Wit in. I mean, that's a play.
Oh yeah. That's true. Yeah, it's part of the Mortality Project. So okay, yeah. So
but also in that case, I think the movie and the play were basically exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, I mean, this novel feels like it doesn't feel like, apart from the editing, right? Apart from cutting certain things out to trim it down to 3 hours. I mean, there are conversations in this novel that are pretty much verbatim in the film. There were some changes made, but yeah, this was good. I've had this book on my shelves for a long time, probably 20 years.
It was so funny, my purchasing of this novel. So I found it in a Goodwill. So there's this Goodwill right next to my apartment, which is like, it's so surprising the things I find at this Goodwill, because you don't expect good books to appear at the Goodwill. And most of the stuff on the bookshelves are like, the stuff that you expect at a thrift store. But occasionally there will be something like, like this. But the funny thing with this is that I saw this, and it was one of those books where I would keep going back to the Goodwill over and over again. This was like this must have been back in 2019 or something. I would keep going back, and this would always be there. And usually books at the Goodwill don't last long. They like get bought and and leave, and then they're replaced by something else. But this kept being there, and I kept being like, wow, no one wants to buy this. And so I kept going back and seeing it and being like, yeah, well, no kidding. A novel by a Swedish film director maybe is not the thing of most interest to people in a small town in Iowa. But then finally it disappeared, and it was bought actually by someone else. And I remember looking at it and be like, oh, because of course I knew who Ingmar Bergman was, and I was like, maybe I should get it, but like I don't know how interesting that's gonna be, and I don't know whether it's actually good, and so I was like, all right, well, whatever. I wasn't that into it, but it's a little bit of a disappointment because I was mulling over buying it, but then like 2 weeks later, it appears there again. And
it was a sign.
What?
I said it was a sign.
A sign? Oh yeah. But it was just so funny how I was like, oh, I missed the chance to buy it. Then it appeared again because I guess someone bought it and then re-donated it. And then that's when I thought, okay, well, I can just ask Jason because he likes Ingmar Bergman. I'll ask him if this novel is any good or if he's read it. And that's when I proposed the buddy read. Although I didn't propose the whole Zoom and Zoom movie thing. That was Jason's idea, but
I don't think we even knew about Zoom then. Yeah, I don't. I mean, maybe it existed, but that was certainly before the pandemic, and certainly before Zoom became a staple in everybody's social lives. I mean, I still remember when I first downloaded this, and I was just grousing about it, and it's like, oh, this is a pain in the ass, and how do I figure this out? And I feel like I've become a little bit of a pro at it, which is kind of weird. But yeah, I mean, even after the pandemic ends, right? Whatever ends means, I suspect that this is going to be a tool, a platform that is going to remain in people's lives. As far as our film club goes on Wednesday night, I don't want that to. I mean, even if the world gets completely back to normal, I don't want that film club to go anywhere. I want to keep that going. We'll be old. Well, I'm already old and gray, but we'll both be old and gray, and have all these old and gray friends, and we'll be on there, and it'll be 20 years from now, and Zoom will be in its 10th iteration or something like this, and maybe we'll all be in 3D or whatever talking about the films. But
we'll be holograms instead of
yeah, we'll be like holograms in a room. Oh, that would be really cool.
We'll be like, in sorry to talk about the Star Wars prequels, but how there's the Jedi Council room that's round where some of the people will be like holograms sitting in their chairs. That's what we'll be. We'll all be able to like lounge in our chairs in our apartment, and we'll just be holograms in a room together.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually. That's a really cool. And who knows? I mean, maybe that's where this technology is going eventually. Something straight out of science fiction. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. But anyway, yeah, this was fun. I'm just so pleased by how Zoom has afforded us opportunities for things like this, right? These conversations on BookTube where they happen in real time, and maybe some people can edit them. I don't know how to edit Zoom videos, so this will just go up in its entirety. But
you edit them.
But yeah, I feel like we've been really blessed by the technology this year, or this last year.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, my friend. Well, I'm going to go upstairs and have a second cup of coffee, and yeah, I will talk to you later on today. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, sure was. All right.
See everybody later.
Bye, guys.
Adios.